Disclaimer: the following is definitely going to contain spoilers. Avert your eyes! Or just click away from the video if you don't like spoilers. Are we good? Well then, thank you very much and let us begin. On this episode of 13 Sentinels Aegis Room Character Files, we will be discussing our ever-lovable trap, professional hacker and programmer, Tsukasa Okino. Or Kiriko Dojin if you're really into his female persona like Hijiyama was. As per usual, we will be starting with the 2188 Tsukasa Okino. The 2188 Tsukasa Okino was an immense genius when it came to the field of programming, to such a degree that he was purposely selected and scouted for Project Art. However, one could say this might also be one of the only reasons he became one of the 15 survivors, as he was fortunately enough on the colony at the time of, well, the extinction event of 2188, which kept him from being infected by the nanomachines that wiped out humanity. It was during his time working with the Interstellar Development Project and Project Art that he met Chihiro Morimura, who would then later have him tested to find out that Tsukasa Okino was indeed her biological son. Chihiro Morimura never married nor slept with a man. However, Tsukasa Okino was born of her egg cells in an artificial lab. So, Tsukasa Okino could be considered a test tube baby. Tsukasa Okino had no idea of any of this, and he also had no idea that Chihiro Morimura felt a sense of maternal responsibility well up inside of herself for him, and thus she would always secretly do things that would benefit Okino, despite it bringing no benefits to Chihiro herself. Tsukasa was also in a romantic relationship with Takatoshi Hijiyama. Yes, they're a BL couple. Legitimately one. And if I'm going to be honest, their chemistry is actually pretty good. But I'll let them do the showcasing, I guess, themselves. Enjoy the log.
What were you thinking, Okino?
What's wrong, Takatoshi?
What's wrong is this core system.
Oh, figured it out, huh?
Okino? Professor Shinonome found it. Daimos? Really? Everyone knows that's one of the old kaiju survival sims. Even I played that thing all the time when I was a kid.
Don't worry about it.
You're putting the fate of humankind's last colony in a video game?
I'm just reusing the infrastructure. Environment management code. Relax. We're not gonna get kaiju popping up.
Still.
And hey, faster than building the code base from scratch, right? Come on. You love me, so you can trust me, right? The work's done. We've done all we can for the human race's future. As long as this colony's life support holds out, as long as I've got even a second more, I'd rather spend it with you.
Tsukasa, you're right. I'd rather be holding you right now myself. I'll see if I can explain it to Professor Shinonome.
Thanks. I love you, Takatoshi.
Though this love would later end in tragedy. Continue the log.
Here begins my final log.
This isn't the same recording.
Tsukasa's dead. The medical bio kits are no good to me now, so I only got an hour or two left. Why did it come to this? It was all logistical debate over Project Arc, an energy dispute, and Tsukasa. He argued to cancel the plan, to divert the energy to life support. If that damn Ogata and his cronies hadn't come armed, no. Too late to point fingers now. Izumi-san shot Tsukasa, so I made him pay. Him and his allies. As for the survivors, there's Professor Shinonome and Ida. They made it out safe. And me. Though, I figure I don't have long left. The hangar's blown out. And the colony's in ruins. It won't even take 20 hours. worked for will be gone. I came here so I could protect people. And now I'll die here. With my friend's blood on my hands. If Project Ark actually goes through. If I actually get to be reborn somehow. I hope I live to protect them. Protect all my friends. My friends. I'm Tsukasa.
Reborn.
Tsukasa Okino was against the project to a certain degree. However, it wasn't to such an extent as the level of Nenji Ogata, who, as you can see, came armed to the debacle and triggered the other side, which included Juro, a very well-trained military man, mind you. I don't have any idea why Nenji, who, despite having some martial prowess, is still a mostly untrained fighter, thought he could outmatch a trained combatant in the military, even when armed with a gun. Unfortunately, Tsukasa became the victim of such a tragic debacle, as the most likely event happening was that Juro either thought that Tsukasa had prior knowledge of all of this because of how staunchly he was against continuing the project and shot him out of anger for betraying his trust, or he wrestled the gun away from Nenji and unfortunately the safety was off and accidentally shot Okino. Regardless of which of the reasons happened, Okino still died for someone else's selfishness. Tsukasa Okino was also the programmer in charge of the simulation's, well, coding. However, as we saw with the log, due to his desire to spend more time with Hijiyama due to the fact that they knew their time was coming, as the colony would have run out of power eventually, even without the interference of Renya Goto hiring Eiseki Gahara causing the explosion of the generator, or Nenji Ogata causing the shootout. It doesn't matter because their time was very limited regardless. One could also argue that perhaps Okino just did not have the available resources or time to conceive a code from scratch for such a complicated program, because remember, the entirety of the simulation is meant to simulate a real human environment, to simulate our entire civilization, our history, and also the people within to be as realistic as possible. Building that from the ground up may be incredibly difficult. However, Tsukasa might have realized, why waste time trying to figure out how to create something from scratch when there is already a pre-existing base that he could use and just modify on, namely the video game Mighty Kaiju Daimos. Now, to put it into the context of our world, Mighty Kaiju Daimos is essentially The Sims, except with much more realistic AI when it comes to the NPCs. And thus, it became the base code for what would later become humanity's last hope. Oh god. Anyway, a video game would become humanity's last bastion of survival. Yeah, that actually sounds pretty hilarious when spoken out loud. Unfortunately, if the program had worked as he intended with no alterations or modifications from outside interferences, Shinonome, no kaiju would have actually spawned, and there would have been no world-ending apocalypse scenario. Instead, it would have just been a regular daily life simulator for the 15 survivors, or should I say, the 15 successors of humanity, until they come of age and would be allowed outside of their pods to exist in the real world. As the simulation was created and also conceived by Tamao Kurabe as a means of educating the 15 successors of humanity so that they would have the required skills to thrive exist and potentially, if need be, survive the new planet that has been cultivated to be as habitable as possible. It would also seem that Tsukasa's genius is ingrained in his DNA, as every incarnation of Tsukasa in each loop has proven to be an immense genius as well when it comes to the fields of programming. Despite his immense genius, Tsukasa was also quite a sociable and approachable person. He has proven to also have quite a sadistic side. No, that wouldn't be the accurate word. Just think of him as a male version of skilled teaser Takagi-san. Yes, that is the most accurate way to put it. And with that, let us move on to the Tsukasa Okino of the first loop. The Tsukasa Okino of the first loop was good friends with Juro Izumi and Chihiro Morimura, ironically enough. Anyway, they would later find the underground universal control under Sakura High School by pure chance, or it's never really explained how they found it, but let's just go with by pure sheer dumb luck. Anyway, Tsukasa would sacrifice himself to use the teleporter, or should I say the shifter, to transfer Juro and Chihiro to somewhere safe. What he did not realize at the time was that what he was actually doing was sending them to Sector Zero so that their data could be backed up and saved. In which case, this would allow them to continue to exist on, even in digital form, because at that point, they are no longer technically human, as their real human bodies were disposed of alongside the failure of the first loop. And thus, the Juro and Chihiro of the first loop would continue to exist as technical ghosts in the machine. Or perhaps even you could call them ghosts in the shell. Anyway, Tsukasa was able to prove that his genius intellect was still with him, because even though it was technically one of the first times he's ever seen the terminal, he was able to immediately figure out how to operate it. Although he was trying to get the timer to work, and for some damn reason this machine's timer never works. Especially whenever Tsukasa is the one doing the programming for some reason. Well, regardless, Tsukasa pretty much desperately did all he could to try and save/preserve his best friends Juro and Chihiro. Because at that point in time, everything they had known had ended, as the kaiju had already destroyed their sector. Now we move on to the Tsukasa Okino of the second loop. The Tsukasa Okino of the second loop would only meet Juro Izumi of the first loop by pure happenstance, because when Juro sacrificed himself so that Chihiro could escape and let himself be imprisoned, they use truth serums and the like to make him start talking, but the first words to come out of his mouth was born of his guilt of not being able to save Okino from the first loop, and thus his name was the first thing uttered. After that, his DNA was tested, and Juro would meet with Juro of the second loop would meet with Juro of the first loop, right after the meeting with Tsukasa. Sadly, as we all know, the second loop didn't pan out very well, as Juro ended up murdering almost everyone in the second loop that was a successor of humanity, including his own self in the second loop. Tsukasa was also one of the confirmed victims on his as shown in the nightmare of Juro of the third loop, when he had a nightmare about what Juro of the first loop did in the second loop. If I recall, the nightmare was entitled The X-Terminator. And yes, this is most likely a reference to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator movie series. So, yeah, now we move on to the third loop, Tsukasa Okino. Tsukasa Okino is an interesting topic in the third loop, because he was not around during the initial infection of the DD426 virus created by Ida Tetsuya. Who knows where he was at that time? Anyway, but he did devise a counter for it. After finding out about the Sentinels infection, he decided to detach his D-code to see if he could get rid of the DD426 infection. However, this came at an interesting cost. To detach the D-code from him would be to detach himself from the body, his real body in the outside world, meaning it was an incredible risk, as he would technically be severing himself from the connection between him and the system completely. The workabout that he found was he was able to program it in such a way that his data, his memories were preserved, and then after DD426 was removed from his body alongside the decode, he re-downloaded everything essential. His personality data, his identity data, how he thought, how he behaved. He converted that all into data and then had it re-downloaded into himself immediately after purging DD426 from his body. After which, Tsukasa would start traveling throughout the sectors, helping as much as he could to prepare the Sentinels for the next fight against the Kaiju. Tsukasa would be first introduced in the story in Hijiyama's path as Miss Kiriko Doji. Now, for further explanation and context, Kiriko Doji in this sense is not real, as she was nothing more than an AI that was represented as being in Tokyo. So, Kiriko Doji, or should I say, Tsukasa Okino, pretended to be her so that he could get closer to the Sentinels and the Sentinel pilots. The reasoning for this was because he experimented on Hijiyama and Keitaro, and would later successfully implant in Keitaro a counter to DD426, a antidote that won't require the extreme measures he took to purge it from his own system. This antidote to DD426 only required other Sentinel pilots to be within or come into contact with Keitaro Miura. Of course, this would later become a problem as Keitaro would come into contact with Juro, and that kind of started the snowball that messed up prisoner number 426 inhabitation of Juro's body, which honestly all it really did was accelerate his plans anyway, so either way it still benefited everyone in the end, regardless of how much of a unfortunate incident it was supposed to be. An interesting thing to note is that prisoner number 426 would actually work by integrating Tsukasa's coding and taking advantage of it, due to the fact that Miura had came into contact with a majority of the Sentinel pilots by pure chance. Tsukasa Okino of the third loop has also shown to have quite a penchant for cross-dressing. Like, he literally just does it because he feels like it now. Partially also because he just loves teasing Hijiyama like the original Tsukasa did with his Hijiyama. So, Tsukasa Okino has also proven to not be beyond using his own feminine charms, we'll call it, to lure unsuspecting victims, Nenji Ogata, into a state of being uncautious due to the fact that, well, Tsukasa Okino is apparently really cute while cross-dressing, according to Nenji and Hijiyama. Aside from finding a way to counteract DD426, Tsukasa also found out about the coding left behind by his previous incarnation, namely the Tsukasa Okino of 2188. And that was when Tsukasa decided to try and manipulate it, to use it to control the simulation and find a way to win. Of course, his plan was eventually beaten up by Juro's plan, which was actually kind of better, as Juro took the parts of the programming that were game-like and made it so that the simulation would now be a fair game between the pilots and the kaiju. In previous incarnations, the Sentinels were always outgunned and outnumbered due to the fact that the factories producing the kaiju would not help the Sentinels, and thus they had to find workabouts in each of their own sectors, which could not keep up with the production centers of Sector 1, which was based in the 2100 era, where the technology was the most advanced, meaning that the kaiju always had an upper hand in previous loops. Tsukasa would unfortunately still get killed in the third loop. However, unlike his previous incarnations in the other loops, as long as the majority, or actually as long as someone was able to properly pass the simulation, all 15 successors would be allowed to be downloaded into their real bodies and out of their pods. Which is also the reason why Tamao Kurabe was so able to get out of the simulation, despite the fact that she perished quite early during the kaiju invasions. Okino was also somehow able to find a workaround so that he could continue to communicate with Hijiyama and maybe the other Sentinel pilots if he really wanted to. However, at that point in time, Hijiyama was literally the only one able to see or hear Tsukasa because, well, Okino set up a private channel inside his Sentinel, which was given to Hijiyama after his quote-unquote demise inside the simulation. Fortunately for Tsukasa, because of the way the simulation and the pods were designed, as long as everybody else succeeded, as mentioned before, they were allowed out of their pods. So Tsukasa Okino would go on to live a happy, fulfilling life with Hijiyama. Yes, he's still having a relationship with Hijiyama, and Hijiyama, quote, is now mostly unfazed by Tsukasa's teasing, which would imply that they've been flirting around for a really good while now, for the past few years that they were out of the simulation. Though Okino is still really inventive, as he was able to find a new way to troll Hijiyama in the revisit of the simulation by, quote, telling him he can be anything Hijiyama wants inside the simulation. Oh boy. I'll leave it up to your imaginations what that's supposed to mean, but I'm pretty sure you all know what Tsukasa Okino meant by that. And he was dressed as Kiriko Doji at that time too, so take that into account. And with that, this episode of 13 Sentinels Aegis Room Character Files is done. Woo! We only have two more important main characters left to discuss. The next one will definitely be Juro Izumi. I decided to make Chihiro Morimura last due to the fact that, one, she was the main reason why Juro Izumi, or should I say prisoner number 426, did everything he did to save everyone. And two, because Chihiro Morimura was both the cause, though indirectly the cause, of the extinction of humankind, as well as the one who conceived of the Interstellar Development Project. And I suppose with that, I'll be ending this episode of 13 Sentinels Aegis Room Character Files. Let's see here. End screen. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video. Also, I sincerely thank you for watching, because this has been a decently long video. And also thank you for listening mostly, because this isn't very visually appealing, I know. But this was meant to be mostly a explanation video, so thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you again in my other videos, maybe my gameplay videos. With that, I bid you all a fun bye!